Great. Know me, and I head up the Intecrowd business in the APJ region. And I've been in the Workday ecosystem in Australia and working globally for the last 8 years or thereabouts. This webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be shared with all of you together with my contact details. So please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to discuss how we can work with you following this webinar, if you have any questions. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the screen on Zoom. We will have time dedicated at the end of the presentation to review and address all the questions raised. So look forward to some interactive discussion there. And today's webinar is very much focused on how you can maximize the return on your Workday investment and drive ongoing value through AMS services tailored to your business needs. But before we start, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about Intecrowd for those of you who aren't familiar with us. So Intecrowd's a boutique Workday services partner. Our focus and all we do is Workday, and we are very focused on having a flexible approach to servicing our clients. We really provide everything across human capital management and financial management. So whether it's a Phase X deployment or a Phase X full financial deployment, for example, Intecrowd both has the experience and the capabilities to do all of that. Our business started very much providing integration services, and across the Workday ecosystem and by Workday, we're really recognized as the go-to partner, especially if there's any particularly complex integration or something that either hasn't been done before or really requires specialized services. Then our application management services, which we'll be talking about today, won't go into too much, but it has become a key part of our business, and we are well recognized for the quality of the service that we provide. And then the other side, which is less common across the partner ecosystem, is we do provide client-side services. So if you're rolling out Workday or you've got a new project within Workday, we can provide the client-side project management or change management consulting and other data conversion services, for example, to help you with your implementation. And if you can move on to the next slide, please. Great. And then just a little bit about Intecrowd's experience. We've got over 150 employees pretty much across the world, as you can see, in the US, Australia, across Europe, and in a couple of other places in Asia as well. We have done over 350 projects for 260 plus customers. We've got over 80 AMS clients, and a point of particular pride is that we have never lost an AMS client to any other partner. So hopefully what we're talking about today will give you a bit of a feel for what differentiates our AMS services. And then last couple are really around integrations and Workday Extend. As I've said, we are recognized as the leader in Workday integrations, and we are one of 9 Workday Extend partners. So what was previously called Workday Cloud Platform, and which is now generally available. We have done a number of projects in the Workday Extend space, and we see it as a very exciting extension to what we've been doing and to what we can provide within Workday. But I think that's probably enough from me and enough general information about Intecrowd. I'd like to hand over to Beth Maxime, who is our presenter today and who heads up our AMS business globally. Beth, over to you.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everyone. Just a little bit more background about me than what you see here. I wanted to share with you that before coming to Intecrowd a couple years ago, I was part of the HR team at Tyco International, where we rolled out Workday globally back in starting in 2010. It was a multi-year deployment, and we were Workday's first large global deployment. So I helped with a lot of their change management and training, and after that helped with their internal shared service center, and we stood that up, and there was a lot of HR transformation happening at the same time. So was really able, when I came to Intecrowd, to take what we did at Tyco, take what we were all doing as leaders at Intecrowd who rolled out Workday as clients ourselves, and apply those to our models and some of our best practices here. So hopefully you will see that as we go through some of these slides and we talk about some of the different areas to focus on. And then we'll have time for some questions at the end as well. So if you have questions, feel free, as Michael mentioned, to use the Q&A, and I'm happy to address those as we go as well. So one of the first things that we see as a differentiator, and this is something to keep in mind whether you've been live with Workday for a long time or you're getting ready to go live today, is changing the mindset from a traditional ERP platform. And that paradigm of previously, you get ready and it's a multi-year preparation to get ready for go live of a system. And at go live, everything is like, that's the finish line. That's where you're at. And you don't make changes to the system for a very long time. It could be several years, up to 10 years sometimes. We see where that doesn't change. And with Workday, it's completely different. And with a lot of the cloud-based platforms, it is different, where it's the opposite, where it's continuously evolving and there are always changes happening. And that impacts not only you as the people who own the system, but also thinking about your users who use the system and how to prepare them for that mindset as well, where they're not going to do the same thing for 10 years. It's going to change regularly, even from year to year. So just kind of thinking through that, making sure that you plan for those changes and staying on top of them. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the next couple slides. So on this slide, I'm going to build it out here a little bit. What we really want to highlight is the typical value of the releases. So you can see we have here every 6 months where there's a release. And if you do nothing during those releases and just kind of ignore them and hold your breath and hope that nothing breaks, you're still going to see an incremental increase in value with Workday, because they're still pushing out enhancements and some additional functionality that you're going to get whether you like it or not. So over time, you'll still see that increase, but that's not really optimizing your value. What you really want to do is make the most of it, of course. So there's a couple different ways that we break that out. Value realization, what we call, is diving a little bit deeper and really preparing for those releases. So every 6 months as they come out, analyzing what's changing, how does that impact my organization and the way we have Workday configured in the way that we use it, and what could really benefit us? Where do we want to focus our time in implementing those changes? So a lot of the opt-in changes tend to get ignored right off the bat, and we really want to take advantage of those because you're going to see increased value if you implement some of those. So that's value realization, and that happens each time there's a release. Value extension comes into play then by taking advantage of some of the additional offerings that Workday has, taking advantage of the power of one, maybe deploying a new module that you're not currently using. Maybe even you purchased a module that you never went live with. And maybe you're even paying a different system to do that same sort of work. So how can you make that more efficient? How can you leverage that? Maybe it will eliminate some integrations for you, looking big picture and more strategically at those types of enhancements. And then up at the top, we have that value realization again. So that ongoing set of improvements and changes that you can look at. And then we'll talk a little bit now about our value continuum. So we break this into 3 phases. And this phase 1 is what happens most often right after go live, but it's not uncommon for some companies to really be in this phase 1 for an extended period of time. So that's what we try to help when we engage with clients who have been live for a long time, but they're still struggling to really kind of move into that phase 2. So phase 1 is very similar to what you would expect in a hypercare, where you are moving at a keep the lights on, addressing those break fix issues, changing those immediate things that need to be addressed. And then from a release standpoint, we see a lot of clients who go live and then there's a release a couple weeks later, and we know that that can be a little bit brutal. So the release strategy for maybe that first release or even second release after you've gone live is really just making sure nothing's going to break before you really get into the optimization of it. Then moving into phase 2, we expect this to happen typically about 6 months after go live, is digging in a little bit more. What have you observed during that phase 1, during your hypercare, to say, okay, what's working and what's not? What do we now need to look at fixing? A review and recommend is a nice way to take a deep dive into some particular modules. If you feel that some modules are a little bit more painful than others, to go in, understand your business case, take a look at how your business processes have been modeled and see, do they need some tweaking? Are there too many approvals? Are there too many, are your team's getting too many notifications where it's so overwhelming that they can't even focus on what's really important? So taking a look at configuration optimization. Maybe you have some unused, what Workday calls SKUs, but what we refer to as modules. So the recruiting module, the benefits module, the advanced compensation module, and so on. And then really taking the strategic advantage of the releases that are coming out, looking at what are opt-ins, looking at what do you need and what is Workday coming out with and where is there a good match. And then phase 3, again, is that value extension. So what can we deploy that's brand new? What can we take advantage of? What's Workday come out with that didn't exist before? So Workday Cloud, formerly Cloud Platform, and now Workday Extend is something that clients are really engaging with because it's meeting some really unique business needs that are helping to make things more efficient overall, that we know is just not on the Workday horizon because it probably doesn't touch enough people, but it's worth it to your particular business. So we'll go through some of the steps and different things to think about, and I will try to keep this in the mindset of if you've been live for 5 years, if you've been live for 5 months, or if you're going live in 5 months, I hope there are different pieces of this that you can take away and apply and reflect on as well. So the first is planning for support. And I really believe that comes from understanding what your team looks like today, where you want your team to be in the future, and then what level of support do you want. So we know that some businesses have a model where they want their internal team to be very self-sufficient, and there's very little outside help that they're looking for. And the biggest piece of that for support might be getting your team up to speed, enabling them, upskilling them in different areas, and making sure that they have the tools and knowledge to do what they're expected to do. In other cases, the model may be to keep a very lean team internally and look outside for support. And that's absolutely okay too. Either way can work very well as long as it's managed. But regardless of whether you have a large team or a small team internally, what we really believe the key is to successful support is flexibility and being able to change over time. Because if you've just gone live, the chances that you'll need a lot more support right after go live is high. And then we expect that to taper off a little bit once there's that stabilization and those key enhancements have been made. We can expect that to level off a little bit. But then there's also initiatives that happen. So having a new module, or when a release comes out, there might be a lot to a release that really impacts you with one particular release. So the flexibility, what what you need today is not what you might need in 6 months or 12 months or 24 months. We know that's going to continue to change. So as you're planning for that support model, make sure that there is flexibility and it aligns well with your business goals. And the second is support readiness. So the biggest piece of this is having a change control model, whether it's a formal change control board or a little bit more of an informal one. We call out here, it doesn't need to be a huge team, but the key takeaway there is that it involves just enough people that it gives you a holistic view of how changes may be impacted. So having a nice blend of HR and IT, financials, if you're using Workday financials and there's a potential for impact there, gives you that holistic view where for your particular line of business, it may not make a difference, but it may make a difference somewhere else. And just having that team to be able to vet through and think through those processes, and then also prioritize them. So how are you doing in prioritizing? One of the other big things here I always say is not only decide on the changes and make a plan for them, but communicate that out to your end users, to those people who are requesting changes. So even if a change isn't going to get made in 6 months, if they know you haven't just ignored them and it is on your roadmap and it is a priority, it just needs to happen in a particular order, the adoption from them and the buy-in kind of from them really can make a big difference. So once you've got those decisions made on what will change, definitely communicate that out as well. And then the third is optimization. So during hypercare, if you are just preparing to go live, the best thing you can do is keep a list of all of the bits of feedback that you're receiving from your users, from those people who are responsible for configuration, even from your support teams. And whether that's having 200 sticky notes on a wall that you move around all the time, or keeping within a software where you can have a list like a smart sheet or something where you're constantly collecting items, definitely collect as much information then as you can. Because after go live, you'll want to be able to, and after hypercare, be able to go back and then start to make decisions against those and prioritize them. So compare those to the business cases and think about why you did things the way you did up front initially, and then compare that to what's working and what's not. So as you prepare for these changes, remember that your teams and your end users have already gone through the experience of moving to Workday, or maybe now they're comfortable with Workday, they've been using it for a couple years, but these changes are still constantly happening. One of the things that I found at Tyco that was really helpful was after any major changes that we made, whether there were significant changes coming out with a release, maybe a user interface major update that happened a couple times, or whether you just have internal initiatives that are making a lot of changes, is to give your teams an opportunity to have a safe place to go to ask questions and to feel like they have a place to go for support. So what we would do after whatever these changes were that were coming out, we'd always document them and send out kind of a mini go-to guide or an overview guide of a page or two of those changes, but also offer a couple webinars, and we would offer them globally. We had a big global population, so we'd offer them in all different time zones, so it was easy for everyone to call in and just ask questions. So on those webinars, we might spend about 10 minutes going through what the changes were, and then just give people the opportunity to ask questions, whether they sent them in a chat, whether they came through an email, or whether they asked them on the call, and we could talk them through if they were stuck on something, what we recommended, how to get through something. And that was some of the best feedback that we ever got, because people just felt supported and they felt like they weren't going to just have to figure something out on their own, which was a really big deal. So I always like to share that story and encourage that wherever possible. And then number 4 is building and following a roadmap. So I mentioned before about communicating out what is planned for. And a roadmap helps not only with the people doing the work and working through it every day and providing suggestions for you or communicating to you what the challenges are that they might be facing, but also with your leadership as well. And one of the things that we find with leadership is executives are really sold on Workday for their reports and the dashboards and the data that they can get that they probably didn't have before Workday. But with Go Live, one of the easiest things to push off are some, with the exception of a few basic reports, the reports, and then especially the dashboards. So this is a good opportunity to build in the reports and the analytics with your roadmap, because you're going to find some big wins with senior leadership of giving them what they really expected out of Workday. Some other things that you probably want to consider are integrations. How can you clean those up? How can you make things less manual? Do you have integrations that aren't working? We hear a lot about, well, we have this integration that runs, but it's missing a couple data fields. So every Friday, someone's sending over a secondary report to get the vendor the information that they need. That kind of defeats the purpose. So how can opportunities like that be cleaned up? We also see the situation where people are live for many years and there's changes that have happened over time to an integration, and it becomes a bit of a mess and it becomes unreliable. So there are points where you have to just take a step back and decide, does this integration just need to be redone from the start so it's clean and we don't have issues happening every time it tries to run? And then one of the other things here is looking at what's Workday coming out with next? What enhancements are coming out that can really make things more efficient? And I know I mentioned it before, but with Workday Extend, it's becoming incredibly popular for companies to be able to think outside the box of what could they really use to make things more efficient. And finally, our last step here is managing those releases strategically. So as I mentioned before, if you are going live and a release is coming out a couple weeks later, even a month or two later, we understand that that's probably the time to say, let's just focus on what's getting pushed out to all of us and make sure that nothing's going to break. But after that, we like to say Workday can be sneaky cool. And if you're not looking for some of those enhancements, or you don't have a partner who's helping you look for some of those enhancements, you can miss some really great opt-ins that can really make your life a lot easier and make it easier for all of your resources who are using Workday every day. One of the other things that we find is for clients, so a great example is Workday Recruiting. So if you went live with recruiting 3 years ago and you haven't really done much with it since, there has been a tremendous amount of functionality and improvements that have been added to Workday Recruiting. So what we're finding now is we're doing what we call refreshes or recruiting refreshes with a lot of our clients, where it's almost a new release for them because they're able to take advantage of a lot of what's come out that they haven't incorporated over the past 2 years or so that Workday's been pushing out these ongoing enhancements. So definitely that's something to take a look at too. If you haven't been able to tap into releases in the past, kind of doing a catch up is sometimes really helpful too. This is really where you can take advantage of the opportunities of Workday or just kind of stay steady state. And we have this last bullet in here because we were at a Workday rug a year or so ago, and we were talking about releases and what people do to prepare and how they organize their teams. And somebody in the back said, I just say a prayer on Friday night and hope that on Saturday when I wake up that nothing's broken. So we always tease about that it's very tempting to be able to do that. We know time is limited for everyone and you have a tremendous number of competing priorities. But when you take a step back and look at the optimization and the ROI of what your Workday investment is, it's one of the biggest and best places to really keep enhancing what you have. So just a quick look here. This is our AMS, a Center of Excellence model at Intecrowd. So just to go over really quickly here, I won't spend too much time on it, but we have our customers over here that work very closely with our AMS customer success team, which is fantastic. And all of our customers have a single point of contact that helps them with that journey management and really taking advantage of what's going on with Workday. But one of the other call outs here is just to say that with Intecrowd, you also have access to the rest of our whole company. So in our virtual centers of what I like to say expertise are all of the different resources working on Workday Extend and Prism and all of the different modules that are deploying every day, and our strategic COE that's helping our clients with the release management and adoption and different things in that way. We're able to tap into them whenever needed for any of our AMS clients or tickets, which is really nice. So just a quick summary here, and then we'll open it up for questions. I know we have a few minutes left. Just a recap here. So planning for support, creating your change control model, creating and executing your roadmap, taking advantage strategically of all of the releases as they come out, and committing to get what you want and not accepting workarounds, not accepting manual work, and making those improvements. So with that, thank you for your time today. I will turn this over to Michael and see if we have any questions that have come in.
Thanks a lot for that, Beth. That is great. So yes, we do have a couple of questions that have come in from the group, and if anybody's got any other ones, please just put them into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. First one, Beth, was how do you support clients in the ANZ region?
That's a great question. So we do have what we call a follow the sun model at Intecrowd, and that is coverage in all of the global regions, including Australia, and as you saw in our earlier slide, some other parts of Asia Pacific as well. So they are responsible for monitoring tickets as they come in and supporting tickets and supporting our Australia clients so that you have real-time local resources to support you. Again, we are all Workday certified as well, so anyone supporting you globally, anyone in your tenant within our AMS team or otherwise is certified in either Workday HCM or financials or integrations. And then we all have our different areas of focus as well.
Great, thanks, Beth. We've got another question that's just come in here. What support do you provide for new Workday releases?
Sure. So we have a process where we reach out, and we've actually just done that this week for the Workday release that's coming up in the next couple months. So we reach out to each of our clients and ask them what level of support they think they're going to need from us, if any. And for those that do, are general at a high level, and I'm happy to share more details with anyone if this is what you're interested in. But we have, we will initially meet with you once you tell us you're interested in looking for some support. We'll have an initial call to go over what's changing, what are your needs, and then based on what that entails, once Workday comes out with the releases, then we go over, this is what we think you should focus on in each module that you have live. And then we'll partner with you on that. We can help you with testing scenarios. We can help you with configuration. We'll have a secondary meeting for things to consider. Of if you've selected, I don't know, 10 of the opt-in items, these are all the things that you'll want to consider for those very specific items. So we're able to customize it at each level. So initially we'll understand what it is you're looking for. We'll compare that against what's coming out for the releases, and then partner with you to help you make sure that you're prepared to test those and get ready and communicate them out to your teams. And we can help you with as little or as much of that as you like.
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Beth. I am conscious that we have used up our time this morning, so we will look at finishing up there. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us this morning. I hope it's been useful to you. And as I said in the beginning, we will be sharing the recording with everybody. And if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything further, please reach out to either myself or to Beth, and we'll happily meet with you and talk through things in more detail. But once again, thanks everybody. It's been a pleasure hosting you today, and look forward to catching up again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.